I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. So by now you might be fed up with me bleating on really about my distaste for genres, and I think my guest today is really sort of giving more power to the No Genre Club. We have a massively talented multi-instrumentalist, a fabulous singer, videographer, animator, designer, producer, label owner, and really like an ultra DIYer. Her third and latest album, Homecoming, feels just like that. So consistently dealing with subjects that, are personal, bruising and heartbreaking. This record really sort of feels like those sort of subjects are now being faced off with more of a spirit of, kind of defiance and resilience. And personally, I'm really happy to see lots of collaborations in there with Shirley Manson, Ezra Furman, Andy Bell, and the magically named Farting Suffragettes. I think collaboration makes sense for so many artists. And musically, Homecoming is it's a beautiful, kind of pop record with plenty of distortion, fuzz and hooks to keep us lo-fi punks happy. So it's a massive welcome to Beth Jeans Houghton. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. I always this is doing that kind of intro part. It's always the sort of interesting part for me because I get to I do a lot of kind of research and then I have to think about what words sound really wanky and but is it kind of capturing it? So I hope I sort of did you justice.
No, that was lovely. It was nice to listen to. Well, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's been really sort of fascinating for me, sort of watching, your evolution over, I guess like sort of trilogy of Du Blonde releases, and kind of like to me, Homecoming feels, I think like like I said, it's less introspective. It feels more triumphant and sort of defiant. Whilst still dealing with these sort of very difficult subjects, and it sounds like you not the whole way over things yet, but it feels more exactly that. It feels more sort of defiant.
Yeah, I do feel like the first two records were, my depression was a lot worse. I was still kind of like in the industry in terms of like working with labels, which was just like hyper stressful. And I felt like I was like trying to like get myself out of a situation, and I would write songs to kind of like write my way through that. And then with Homecoming, like I'm definitely not all the way through all of, can I swear? I'm assuming
you can.
I can.
Yeah, you can. Tourette's. I've already used the W word anyway myself, so
Oh, you did?
Whatever happens.
Wait, was it wank or did I just say that?
It was, okay. But they had a Y on the end as well.
Wanky. So yeah, I don't feel like I'm totally over all the shit in terms of mental health, but I think that's like a standard thing. I think like, even with like addiction or eating disorders, things like that, they don't really go away. You just deal with them better throughout time, hopefully. But I feel like I'm in such a better place mental health wise, and then also with self-releasing, and I don't answer to anybody now, which is nice because I hate authority in the music industry. So yeah, I think that it's definitely more triumphant, and I feel like you can sort of like hear my glee of being able to just like record something in my bedroom and not have to justify it to some middle-aged white guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've been sort of coming for a while, I mean, without getting into any sort of details, but that been sort of coming for a while, and you sort of felt that with your, we'll talk a lot about, kind of mindset, but with your, the sort of character, your character, that you felt that's something that I can do and I want to do.
With like, as in just with Du Blonde?
Yeah, and kind of like going solo.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
With your own label.
Yeah, I think that I thought back to when I first started recording music and I didn't have a record contract or anything, and I was like
Mm.
16, and I would produce everything at home, and I used Pro Tools. I had like a full setup,
Yeah.
and I loved it. And I think that like some of my most creative stuff came out of that scenario. And then
Mm.
when I signed with labels, I started being put into studios with all men, only men,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
uh, it was sort of like beaten out of me. Like I wasn't allowed to like. I've worked with people who'd be like, no, we're going to get like a professional guitar player to play this part.
Mm.
Or
Mm.
like I worked with someone where I was like, I'd like to really play the piano on this song that I wrote. And he was just like, well, can you even play piano?
Yeah.
I was like, fuck you, I wrote it, you dick. And so just all of that stuff was so, it just felt like really like degrading. And then also like if you have like mental health struggles, which I think most musicians do have,
Yeah. Yeah.
and or if you've been in abusive relationships and experienced, you know, like gaslighting, all this stuff, it's
Yeah.
really hard not to think like, oh, maybe I can't play piano. And in
Yeah.
the back of your
Yeah.
brain you're like, yeah, I for sure can. But if you don't have the confidence to, or if you don't
Yeah.
feel like you can speak up for yourself because somebody else is
Yeah.
paying for the album, then it can really just make you feel just worthless, and like you
Mm.
can't do it, and you need these people, which is, you know, it's just like an abusive relationship with
Is
someone where
yeah.
they make you feel like you can't leave because you need them for, you know, supporting you because you're such a shit person.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess
Yeah.
it's like that they, you know, those kind of situations, you know, they sort of play into your, you know, kind of difficult, not your, but, you know, kind of
Mhm.
like our sort of difficulties with self-belief, you
Yeah.
know, which is one of the hardest things to kind of overcome, is to, you know, is believing in yourself. And kind of
Yeah.
when you have people sort of coming in who are, you know, let's say, you know, in any kind of industry that are
Mhm.
supposedly sort of, you know, respectable and respected,
Yeah.
you know, it plays on our kind of own sort of fears and anxieties around that.
Definitely. And I think there's like what you're saying about people who are respectable and respected, it's just like, you know, when you're a kid and you're like, you know, well, not everyone, but you're like, oh, you know, parents are like
Mm.
superheroes and blah blah blah, and then you're like,
Yeah.
oh no, they've got all these issues. And it's the same with, you know, like people who are in an industry who are like, you know, higher up than you, or like famous people, and there's always this idea that they're something other than a flawed person, or a
Mm.
person with their own issues, or, you know, difficulties with like
Yeah.
communication and all of this stuff. And if you're a young person especially, it's really it can take a long time before you realize that, you know, maybe they don't know what they're doing, and maybe what you need isn't some professional who's been doing it for 30 years, but like an empathetic human who's excited about music and wants to support you in what you do, not what they think you should do.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was interested. In fact, I was. It was really, really sort of weird sort of timing, because one thing I was going to talk to you about was the human library, right? And I saw that.
Yeah.
Yes, and I saw, and just this morning I saw that you posted on your Instagram stories about the human library.
Wait, so you
Like,
were going to ask me
wow,
before?
yeah, yeah. I
You're
was like, wow, I
psychic.
can't believe it. Yeah, yeah, because
Wow.
I'd sort of followed them for, I don't know, maybe a year, 18 months, or something like
Yeah.
that.
I
And
literally read about them last night.
yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, what did you think? I mean, over to you to.
Okay, so first of all, for me, the most exciting and interesting stories are ones that are about or from like very normal everyday people, which is
Mm.
why I love podcasts like This American Life,
Mm.
or there's that guy who does like Humans of New York, where he'll like take a
Yeah,
photo of a random person and they just tell their life story or something.
yeah, yeah,
um and same with like This American Life. It's just like you have an hour of listening to some random person who, you know, because they're not famous or because they're not the CEO of something, you wouldn't usually hear their story. And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just infinitely more interesting than hearing about how some guy made a startup in San Francisco.
Totally.
You
Yeah,
know.
absolutely, absolutely.
um And so then when I saw the human library, I was just, for anyone listening, it's a library where people are books and you can go and basically, I was going to say rent out a person, not
Yeah.
not like that. And they'll tell you their life story, and they have, you know, different subjects. I think they advertise it as, you know, like someone's title would be like refugee, or like manic depressive, or
Yeah.
all of these different things. And I just think it's just so interesting. And I love because I come from Newcastle, and when I was a kid, like if you sat on the bus, you just have a conversation with the person next to you. And then I moved to London, and it was just like, if you know, catch someone's eye on the tube, they think that you're crazy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, I find strangers so interesting.
I think I agree with you. I mean, I thought it was an incredible, you know, idea to, you know, sort of, you know, get people, well, basically kind of celebrating diversity, and to
Yeah,
get people to, you know, kind of join in and start to learn. And the
yeah.
fact that people have kind of volunteered to go on there
Hmm.
shows that they want to tell their story,
Yeah,
you know, which,
definitely.
like you say, they don't get the chance to do in kind of regular
Yeah.
day-to-day life.
And I think as well, when people have like prejudice, what's the word, who
Yeah.
knows, they, I think, you know, when you hear stories about people turning their lives around and their beliefs around, it often comes from a meeting that they had with someone who they
Mm,
previously would have judged.
yeah.
So, you know, a trans person, you know, maybe they've never met a trans person, and then they have a conversation with
Yeah.
them, and they're like, this is a person, and like, who
Yeah.
gives a shit, you know, what gender they are, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good way of, you know, expanding people's minds and understandings, um, of, yeah, different kinds of people, and just
Mm,
people you would never really meet, you know, like growing up in Newcastle, it's somewhat culturally diverse, but like,
yeah.
you know, I think there was like maybe like 10 people of color in my school.
Mm-hmm.
um and it just wasn't something I noticed until I started traveling, and it's kind of like, it's great to have those opportunities to meet people from different backgrounds that you wouldn't
Yeah.
have access to in your everyday life. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Going back, I mean, talking about school, you know, sort of going back
Yeah,
to, you know, to your childhood and how your kind of like mindset, you know, evolved, and, you know, your sort of formative influences, you know, you know, what was, are there kind of big things that sort of stick out as to, you know, things that influenced you and how you
yeah.
are now?
I mean, I think a big part of me as a person is that I love LA, or I love California. And that came from, I think, when I was about 6, and my mum played me Ladies of the Canyon by Joni Mitchell on vinyl. And it
Mm,
was kind of like a moment where I was just like, ah, oh, music coming out of this weird like disc, and then also like, ah, oh, California. Um, and both of those things have, you know, become my life, and I spend so much time in California, and
mm,
I'd love to live there. And that ended up, you know, opening up a whole thing of like, you know, like West Coast psych and all of the stuff that I was really
yeah,
interested in.
mm,
um and not just the music, but the way that people, you know, on the West Coast in the 70s collaborated, and you could read the back of, you know, one person's record and see the name of someone else and go and find their music, and then, you know, their bass player also played on this other thing.
yeah,
And it just was really, really exciting thing to me. I was like, I could live in a canyon and you know, have 5 bands or whatever. um, it's difficult with visas, but you know, I'll figure it out.
yeah. I mean, you kind of like sort of keep your options open, don't you? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
I've got 5 bands, why not have 6? You know, I'll do another one.
Yes,
I mean, talking about that,
exactly.
I mean, obviously, you know, your latest album is, you know, there's a lot of kind of collaboration on there, which for me
Yeah.
personally, I think it's brilliant, and I think there's a lot more of this been happening, you know, sort of recently,
Yes.
and I you know, I'm not a, like I said, I'm not a fan of genres, and because I
Me
think
neither.
bit lazy, you know, like you sort of put
Yeah,
people into kind of like categories, and if you're in that one, you never get seen, you know, elsewhere. So you kind of miss
yeah,
out on or you know, people miss out when they go to kind of record stores and you know they're just looking at
yeah,
the category because people you know can get very blinkered in sort of that way.
yeah.
But I mean, you know, what do they, you know, these sort of collaborations, what do they give you?
Well, so I used to be really opposed to collaborating
Mm,
when I was with record labels because I was fighting so much for my own work and
yeah,
for my own ideas um and it I was so protective over what I was doing because
mm,
it was difficult to make it mine
that makes
that
sense.
I didn't want to bring anyone else into that because I just couldn't handle it, especially if it was like a cis man,
Yeah,
because that person automatically gets credit for everything on the song,
yeah, yeah,
which actually happened recently with Andy Bell on Homecoming. So he played
mm,
bass on All the Way.
yeah,
And so I wrote and recorded the entire song and then sent it to him, and he played uh, the bass line, which I
yeah,
love.
yeah,
And then I saw someone saying something about like, Homecoming's all like this, but it's kind of saved by like Andy Bell making All the Way like a totally different vibe. And I
mm,
was like, I made it a different vibe.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And Andy played a really fucking great bass line that I love.
mm,
And I love what he added to it, but it's just this thing where people do it subconsciously. And I'd play shows and I always had like male band members who didn't write any of the music,
mm,
and people would be being like, oh, I love this song you wrote, to them. Or
mm,
someone went up to my A&R guy once, like years ago, and was just like, well, we can tell which ones she wrote and which ones the guys wrote. And he was like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh, like just some of them are like really good. It's like, right, so I couldn't have possibly
that's
done that because I
decent
got a
then.
fucking vagina. You
Oh my God,
tit.
it's unbelievable.
I know. So I was really opposed to it for the longest time. And then
Yeah,
I just felt a lot of freedom and joy about it's just the first time in a long time I've been really excited. Like, I always love making records, but the excitement is often numbed by the anxiety of like, I have to try and make this mine,
yeah,
and who do I have to fight for that?
yeah,
Whereas like with this, there was nobody. And so I was just like, I'm gonna get this person, and then like at one point I was like, I'll have a collaborator on every one, which didn't work out. Also, maybe that would have been a bit much. But then also coupled with I think that like in the past, if I'd thought about collaborators, it's like who's in town.
mm,
Whereas like because of the pandemic,
yeah.
no one, and if they are, they're not allowed over anyway.
Yeah,
Um, and so I was just like, well, just I'll do it over email. And it just opened it up to like who I could work with, because it
mm,
didn't matter if they were on the moon.
yeah. What I mean,
I
what
could.
was the? I mean, what was the sort of the response like? I mean, obviously it was great for the record, but I mean, you know, generally, I mean, people really receptive to doing this,
Yeah. Do you mean in terms of collaborators?
of collaborating. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, there was no. I mean, there was a couple of people who were like too busy or whatever, but nobody really said no, and it wasn't like a
mm,
difficult thing to do. And I think people, you know, musicians just want to make music.
yeah, yeah,
And I think, collaborating is really fun because you don't have to commit too much time.
yeah,
um, you might end up doing something that you wouldn't have done before, and then same for
yeah,
me, like there was things that people did on the songs that I never would have thought of.
yeah, yeah.
um, but it made it better and more interesting.
I think I mean, I think it's great because it's like you know, it helps with kind of curiosity and wondering how things are gonna sort of play out. I
Hmm.
remember I was like previous episode I was talking to Richie Kennedy, he's a producer up at the Assault and Battery Studio,
Hmm.
and he was saying like one thing that he does when is to, even with, you know, with members of the band, is to get them to play different instruments,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of get them, you know, kind of thinking about what that would sound like, together, you know, in a
Yeah,
different way,
yeah,
to kind of produce these different ideas, which I think is great, you know. And it's
definitely.
similar with kind of collaborations. You don't know how it's going to work out. But
Yeah, and then you can also take that away and apply it to your own music afterwards.
yeah,
Yeah, it's also just nice to like work with friends, I think.
absolutely, yeah.
Unless you're like working with friends and then you fall out and never talk again.
Well, no, you kind of got you got the kind of freedom to do it, haven't you?
Yeah,
Fall out with whom you
yeah,
want as well.
definitely.
So you know, would you? I mean, talk about kind of curiosity. You know, how would you call yourself a curious person?
Like a curious bit? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably too curious. Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of like, I like to know how things work and why things work.
Yeah.
Um, but there's also a side of me who's like, if I can't figure it out, I'll still do it anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am. I'm really interested in humans and psychology and
Well,
yeah,
everything's kind of like driven by that, isn't it? You know, sort of human behavior, and you know how people, I think, you know, kind of going back and looking at, you know, sort of formative influences, you know, that those sort of stay with you. I mean, I've been, you know, sort of recently sort of thinking, you know, my parents are kind of getting really old now. They're in sort of care,
yeah,
and it kind of like there's some things that happen where you take you back to your childhood. And you think,
yeah,
why do I react a kind of certain way to this now? Eventually, sort of piece it back and trace it right back. It's like,
yeah.
it's
I was thinking about
that.
this. I was thinking about this recently. I was talking to my friend because I was like, I think I need a therapist again because I had therapy for years and
Yeah,
sort of like, you know, work through like a bunch of
yeah,
stuff and I had therapy at the time to you know, like reduce my anxiety and
mm,
just my mental health was in tatters. But now I kind of want it because like there's other less severe things that, you know, happen in my life and in my experiences, which I also think that I could maybe like curb or try and like control more,
mm,
which mostly is reactions, like how do
mm,
I react to stuff. And a lot of anxiety comes from not being able to, you know, like see something coming quick
yeah,
enough that you can like control your reaction to it.
yeah, yeah.
um and I think, yeah, a lot of that comes from childhood.
I mean, that's one of the hardest things to do, isn't it? You know, sort of like the I guess this, you know, part of emotional intelligence is, you know, how to manage yourself and to like
Yeah,
restrain yourself from wanting to, you know, kind of, well, in sort of pandemic, sort of punch the screen if somebody's pissing you off, stuff
totally.
like that.
Oh yes,
You know, it's a constant
absolutely.
thing, you know, and you know, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I want to stop certain things I just don't care about. And it's like, oh, whatever. And I've gotten really good at like when I was younger, like I used to be really affected by, you know, like what people wrote about me or
Mm,
like mean comments or,
mm,
and it would really like get under, you know, part my logical brain was like, I don't care, it doesn't make a difference, like who's this
uh,
person, but it really, you know, along with the you know, the label stuff, it put me in this position where I was just like, I don't know who I am, like when I did
mm,
this thing this person said this, and also this person says I should, you know, make electronic music, and it just makes you question a lot of stuff. And so that stuff I don't, you know,
I,
mostly when I see a mean comment now I chuckle.
I was going to say, how do you sort of manage that now? Because I mean,
um
it is.
well, so the other day I remembered there was like this video I'd put out when I was like, I was probably like 21 or whatever.
Mm,
And I was super skinny because I had an eating disorder and no one knew. And
mm,
someone had put like, she looks like a 14-year-old boy. And there was like a lot of people used to say stuff about my looks, being like, is that a man or a woman? And all of this
mm,
stuff. And at the time I was like, oh, because I hadn't even, you know, like identified that I was trans yet.
mm.
But now looking back, I'm like, actually, yes, you're right. I am a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but it, you know, I can look back at it and laugh. And you know, some people, uh, say shitty stuff, and in the moment I'm like, God, that's a shitty thing to say.
Mm.
And then I just like block him or forget about it.
Mm.
It doesn't stay with me like it used to stay with me. It doesn't change how I feel about myself. And I've gotten much better, even in sort of like relationships
Yeah.
or friendships or whatever. Like it used to like really cut me up if I was like, oh, this person doesn't like me, or they think I did this thing. And now it's just like, I'll still be sad or whatever, like for like a month, and I'm like, oh, you know, I've been heartbroken so many times. I'm like, I'm gonna find the next person at some point. Yeah, maybe I just got so broken I couldn't be any more broken. And now I'm happy.
No, you're happy.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Is this like is it like a sort of constant thing that you have to sort of work at, you know, to
Yeah.
oh, right, ignore that shit, you know, it doesn't matter.
I think it was for, it's kind of like when you learn to play guitar for the first time and you're like, my fingers will not contort into an
Yeah,
A.
yeah, yeah.
And then this is my experience anyway. And then about 6 months in, I was like, oh, I'm just doing it. I'm not even thinking about it. And I think it is like you've got to work at it in many ways. And like a lot of my therapy was like CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
about sort of like assessing or like preempting what your actions will be and then thinking about it and being like, do I need to react this way? And it's just kind of like, it's like anything, like if you practice doing something enough, it just kind of becomes part of you and you don't have to like work to engage that part of your brain anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I mean, I'm 31. It's taken me
Mm.
at least 25 years to get here.
To get to where you are.
Yeah.
How do you kind of feel when you look back at you know, some of your earlier music, you know, going back
Oh God.
like 10 years or so, you know, because you, you've evolved, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying, but you musically certainly you've
Yeah,
gone.
I mean, I'm one of the unlucky ones who like I I began making music on the cusp of like, you know, like MySpace and internet stuff, and
Yeah, yeah.
so like my stuff's everywhere. Like I can't run from my worst mistakes. Which
MySpace and
in,
Tom.
oh God, yeah, and it's just like I don't, you know, I don't mind, but I did a podcast with someone recently where they sort of went through like the whole sort of journey of my music,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize that he was going to put in clips of the actual, you know, like a song I put out when I was like 16 or whatever, and and I listened back to it, I was like, I'm just fucking horrified. Like I didn't know how to say. I smoked for 20 years, so I have like a pretty low voice now, but when I first started out, it was really like high and also like nasal and
Yeah.
so like overly sincere, like singing about like love or whatever. And also like, as you know, when I was a kid, you know, the people would always be like, you're too young to know what love is, and I'm like, that's bullshit.
Oh, that old
I
chest.
don't agree with that, but also it's just like, oh man, oh, it's just so cringy. I hate it, but also it's like whatever.
But that was you at that wasn't it? You know, that's kind of who you
Yeah.
were. And
Yes, and I'm also proud of that person for
yeah,
sticking with it, and the things that I dealt with, and I'm still
yeah.
here. But like, man, I wish it was just in, you know, someone's bookcase somewhere and not on YouTube. Ugh.
Oh my.
Yeah.
How about you know, how much do you sort of rely on your you know, kind of gut instinct? How important is that? Is that for you?
Oh, it's so important. Do you mean in music or in life?
Generally in life,
Generally, okay, because I was
music,
thinking about this the other
life,
day.
whatever.
I mean, always.
Hmm.
The thing that yeah, I have a good track record of my gut instinct being correct.
Yeah.
So the thing that I had to learn was to trust myself enough to follow it, because I've got
Mm,
myself in so much shit when I'm like, I feel like this thing is wrong, and then
mm.
either I question myself or someone else questions me, and so I do what they say, and then later I'm like, you were wrong. I should never have done that.
Yeah.
The thing that I do question a bit now is my gut instinct about people.
Mm.
Because mostly I think that I get like a good take on someone from like talking to them.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's been more and more as I get older, there's situations where I'll meet someone, I'll be like, this is like the fucking best person.
Mm.
And then like a couple of months down the line, I'm like, oh no.
Mm. Mm.
Like, so that I kind of, I think that's probably also what I was gonna try and like figure out in therapy. But then again, you know, it's hard because like some people are really, especially narcissists, they're very good at
Yeah.
convincing you
Yeah.
that they're someone else. So maybe I won't beat myself up about that.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of that. I mean, I think you know that I mean, narcissistic sort of personalities have been around for a long time. It feels now like there's Christ, there's so many more that you sort of spot. Whether it's
I
like a
know.
awareness, I don't know, but it
I
definitely.
think I think there's like a much greater awareness of mental health and personality
Yeah.
types and stuff now.
Mhm.
I was talking to my friend recently, and he's just like, everyone's a narcissist nowadays, as in like, oh, you know, that many people can't be narcissists. And I was just like, well, you know, you can think of it in the, you know, the general idea of the word is like someone who's
Mm.
conceited. But
Yeah.
really, you know, with narcissistic personality disorder, it goes much deeper. And, you know, you can have a narcissist who's shy,
Yeah.
who, you know, isn't outgoing. And it's about how they view the world and the people around them and how they manipulate that to come back to
Absolutely.
them because they feel really bad about themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
No, it's
also, yeah.
no. Go on. Go on.
No, I was just gonna say like I think a lot about these things because I'm super into, you know, like psychology, and like I've had
Mm.
years of therapy, and also my best friend has as well. So we talk about it a lot. But maybe people don't think about these things as much as I do.
Well, I no, I know what you mean. I mean, I kind of love that sort of.
Yeah.
So love it. I love sort of thinking about it. And
Love narcissists.
I know,
Okay.
I know. Right, you need to get off this podcast right now. I need to find someone else to do.
Yeah.
My ratings are going to go right downhill. Everything that I've had is just going to be sort of plummeting off a cliff now. But no, I think it's, it affects, kind of like sort of human behavior. I mean, it affects, like just all aspects of life. I mean, everything that we do kind of like starts with that, and how,
Mhm.
kind of sort of society evolves. I mean, if you look at, you're talking about the music industry sort of per se, but
Yeah.
in everything, the whole kind of like institutionalization, the way that things have been, kind of like systemically supported,
Mhm.
to sort of prevent the, that sort
Yeah.
of top tier
Collapse. Yeah.
from anybody else from breaking through there.
Yeah.
It's all rooted in human behavior. It's like,
Yeah.
once I've got something, that
Mhm.
whatever that, I can't remember what that behavioral bias is, but once I've got something, it's harder then to give that up, rather than, because you've got it, you feel like you've lost something.
Totally. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Absolutely.
behaviors that, like, these kind of like sort of
Mhm.
biases that sort of
Yeah.
exist right through kind of society.
Yeah. And when it becomes normalized, it's sort of people don't think about whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of like I have less. I mean, like, yeah, I don't like people who are ruthless, you
Mm.
know, to benefit themselves. But what I like less is people who are ruthless to benefit themselves while convincing you that they're doing you a favor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And they shroud it in like, I'm kind and I'm gonna help you out while,
Yeah.
you know,
Which is
taking
good.
all your money.
Which is like, kind of going back to what you were saying about, kind of gut instinct, when you have
Hmm.
those sort of people that convince you otherwise, to
Hmm.
go against your gut, and really there's an ulterior motive that's going on.
Hmm.
They're not
Yeah,
saying it for your best interests. It's like it's
absolutely.
for their own best interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well, for sure.
Hmm. And it's really hard if yeah, if you struggle with mental health anyway, because you're a lot you're a lot more easily led when you're prone to questioning
Yeah.
yourself.
I did read like in an interview you gave a few years ago. Sorry, I'm not going to bring it all up. It's not like
Oh no, I'm intrigued. I
no,
say so many things. Which
it
one?
was about I think the interviewer sort of asked you, what would you give any advice for any, kind of like, rock and roll dreamers, people wanting to sort of get into the industry, and your advice was go on an accountancy course.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Now,
Yeah.
is this something like you've obviously become like, completely sort of self-sufficient and, do it yourself. And is that advice coming from that sort of place where you need to be in control of what is and understand what's going on?
That's because at the beginning when I would sign contracts, and this is in a situation where like I even had like lawyers look over them and stuff. I was like, I guess this looks like a good deal. But there's also all different sort of aspects of contracts and working with labels, or just like working in the industry, like not knowing your worth, not knowing how much people are spending of what is, technically money you've got to pay back with royalties. And also it's such an expensive thing to do. It's such an expensive job. With such little income most of the time, that the only way that you're going to be able to manage to do this without just living off a kind of soup every day, which I did for 6 months once, is to know how to save, know where you can cut your costs, figure out like what's worth paying for and what you don't need to pay for, and just save money, because you could sign a contract and get an advance, which seems like a big amount of money, but then it ends up having to last you 4 years, and you spent it all in the first year because you thought another one was coming, and usually it's not. So the accountancy thing was more, if someone wants to make it a viable, sustainable job, you've really got to understand money and spending and saving in order to do that.
It's funny, I like in the episode I've just released, I was talking to Zia McCabe from
which I listened to. That was great. I played some of that for my mum and we were chuckling away.
Oh, it's brilliant.
She's great.
We're gonna we've got a second one coming up as well.
Amazing. Great.
Like, as she said, I'm quite wordy, so
me too.
It's kind of great. But she was saying exactly. She said that she was always very good with numbers, and she says I can't. Well, you remember, I can't stress how important it is to know about that business side of what you're getting into.
The business side of what you're getting into, but also having a sense of business where it comes naturally or not, in terms of other things you do. If I didn't do all the other jobs that I do, I would not be able to make music. So animation, graphic design, illustration, making clothes, all of the stuff, and it's all like, I'm super lucky that everything that I do is something that I enjoy doing and know how to do, because I have no qualifications. I was never academic. I could never go and work in an office because I've got ADHD and Tourette's, and so it was the advice my mum gave me when I was starting out was like, I left school when I was 14, which she didn't know about, and when I was 16, it was like time to like pick a college or whatever, and I just didn't want to go to college. I did 2 weeks of a fashion course, and the teacher was like, everybody's got to do exactly the same thing, and I was like, well, so we'll all end up with the same portfolios going for the same job. And she's just like, don't question me. And then so I left, and my mum was like, well, because my mum's a graphic designer, and I was like, well, I want to do music or art or whatever creative stuff, and she was just like, that's fine, but learn how to like make money from it. And I was like, that's just really good advice.
Totally.
And I think there's also this like prevailing sense that I get this from conversations with a lot of people, that if you're an artist or a musician and you make money from something, that you're selling out and it's not legit art, which I just think is like, why? Like, would you be like, oh, I can't believe you've sold your burger for £4, like you're such a sellout.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That sort of puritanical kind of
yeah,
ethos.
and
Yeah,
that's something that I really had to get over. Like, I used to sell my stuff so cheap when I was younger because I was just like, oh, like, or like if someone would pay me for something, I'd be like, thank you, I'm so grateful, which I am. I'm grateful that I'm getting paid, but I worked for that.
yeah,
It's not a gift that they've given me for nothing.
yeah, yeah.
And that's something that, like, a lot of musicians either don't know their worth or they do know their worth, but the way that the system is set up,
Mm,
there's there's like, I believe in paying everyone fairly, and to do so for the past 10 years I took no money from my shows. I
yeah,
split it just between the musicians.
yeah, yeah.
um and it's like, it goes, and then right at the top you've got these huge companies who are making millions, and you're
Absolutely.
like, you wouldn't exist without all of these people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
um so I think, yeah, I think taking also, it's so interesting, and I love spreadsheets, and I love looking at stuff and like knowing, what's this going to make, and how much do I have to sell this to do this, and then once I've done that I can afford to make the next EP.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just like the sense of like control and like autonomy that it gives you is really freeing, and then less and less you have to rely on paying other people to do stuff.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel when you get those really annoying errors in Excel in a spreadsheet?
I don't use Excel.
No.
I use numbers.
Ah, right, right.
Yeah, no, because I was like a Macintosh child.
Yeah, yeah,
um and and I also only really got into spreadsheets in the past 4 or 5 years when I started having to do my own. I had a lovely accountant called David,
yeah,
and he retired. And his story, if you're interested, is that he
yeah,
was in a band, I think in the 70s and 80s,
yeah.
and they got fucked over
Mm,
financially, and he became an accountant for musicians.
right. Okay. Okay.
And he was my accountant for the longest time, and I think he hates my music, and he would still turn up at my shows. And yeah, and then when he retired, I was like, he sort of taught me along the way. He would always explain to me why he was doing something, which
Yeah.
is also the experience I had with Ben Hillier, who produced my first album,
Mm,
which was just me, Not Too
mm,
Blonde. And he had no issue when I was just like, what does this button do? And he'd
mm,
be like, it does this, and then if you do this with it, it does this other thing. And I love people, like, they're not gatekeepers. They're not going to be like, you'll learn when you're older, or like, you don't
yeah.
need to
Yeah.
know. um
I remember something that Henry Rollins said about education.
yeah,
And I mean, he's a massive believer in kind of education, and it's
yeah, totally.
the way to kind of like increase equality, in
Hmm.
the world. And it's the
Absolutely.
same kind of thing. People who teach you as you're going along, so you understand and you can then progress yourself. I mean,
Yeah, totally, which is kind of why I started DTV as a label,
yeah,
because I was like, I've done all of this figuring out of like how you can actually make money as a musician, and how
mm,
you can make money with merch and the kind of things that people
mm,
like to buy and that they value, that you can, create without getting burnt out.
yeah,
um so it's just like, I want to help other people do that. I want to help people
that's it.
who were like me when I was younger and I had no clue,
Yeah,
actually try and get a good start and avoid the pitfalls of it all.
and that's kind of like you're thinking for the label for DTV now, that's going to be
Yeah,
you're
and
going
also,
to
yeah, so it's like we're doing sort of, like cassettes and CDs and stuff, and it's
mm,
all very short run, limited edition stuff, and we pay for the manufacturing and like figure it all out, and if they need artwork done or whatever,
yeah, yeah,
and then they get, I just burped, sorry, and then they get they get merch to sell.
yeah,
And none of it, we don't take any digital, they own all of their rights.
yeah, yeah,
But also, I wanted to stock kind of like the things that musicians who are also makers make on the side. So if
Yeah.
they create art or clothing or sculptures or
Yeah.
whatever, just like a platform, and have it all in one place so people know I'm going to be, even if it's just like I want to get a cool gift for my boyfriend or whatever,
Yeah.
and there's just like a whole array of different things, and you know with everything that you're buying you're supporting like an artist directly.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, I really do. I think it's totally fantastic. It's the way that it should be. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you've got you know, like so many, you know, kind of skills and sort of talents, and you use those in different ways through your, you know, kind of fashion, you know, design,
Yeah.
your, you know, kind of animation and videography, and obviously then the music as well.
Yeah.
You know, you enjoy doing that with, and
Yeah.
other artists, you know, maybe not all of them, but most of them will be in the same kind of position. That's why they do it, is because they love it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's kind of part of them. It's part of their identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think people don't realize that, you know, I mean, I don't want to say that you can make money as a musician, because like that's totally, you know, person by person.
Yeah,
If you're a session musician, it's harder or whatever, but
yeah,
there are people who want to buy stuff that musicians
yeah,
make, and it's worth doing that stuff.
yeah,
And even with like because I think probably in the past 10 years I made like 40 quid from Spotify.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I was just like, this is ridiculous or whatever. And then when I released Homecoming, I think in the past 3 months or something, I've made like £600.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
No,
and it's
but you
because,
just playing it on repeat, 24 hours a
yeah,
day.
but it's not even that. I've had more plays on the other stuff. It's that there's no middleman taking the money.
Ah, of course. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So I own the rights to
Got the
my
rights. Yeah,
music outright,
yeah.
you know. And I think that like labels, also there are great labels and there's great
Mm,
people at labels, and I think that for some people like using a label is the right way to go.
mm,
But I think that it's based on a system and a structure that worked in the 70s and 80s
mm,
when people bought physical records, and
yeah,
now labels are like terrified because nobody sells that many physical things anymore.
yeah.
And so they're like, we've got to figure out like a different way to do it in this
Mm,
new sort of digital climate.
yeah.
But musicians are getting left behind. And so, you know, when I was younger, it was just like, oh, they'll give me an advance so I can pay my rent while I do this thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But it wouldn't last that long. It's not, they're not paying you. You have to pay that back. It's like a glorified loan.
It's a hugely pressurized model, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, totally. And also, you know, the bigger the label you're with, um, the more they'll spend in the background,
mm,
and the more you owe them.
mm,
And then also you just don't own your rights for like 15 years.
yeah.
Um, and so,
I mean, with say, you know, with your sort of creativity, you know, if you know, within that, you know, kind of label model, how would that affect your, you know, if let's say that you get a kind of mental block, it's okay, I can't, you know, I'm just not sort of feeling it, and then there's the pressure of the kind of label doing that.
oh, yeah,
Now you've got the more freedom in a way. Obviously,
yeah.
there's different stresses and responsibilities that you have now, but it's different. But how does that kind of affect your creativity? You know, if you get things wrong, you have to kind of like start again, or whatever.
I'm 100% more creative and more productive now.
Mm,
Um, because I'm super sensitive to stress,
yeah,
and my stress response is to just shut down.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and that's also like my creativity shuts down.
Mm,
I'd be in a situation where it was like, you need to get this many songs done by this date, and they need to sound like this, and you can't do this.
oh,
Just nothing would come out.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, you can't force creativity, you can't force inspiration. And if you try to, everything that you make will be shit, in my experience anyway.
yeah,
And so there was that, coupled with labels taking 3 years to put out a record.
mm,
I was just depressed, and I wouldn't write a song for a year.
mm,
And ever since I started writing Homecoming, I've written every day. There's no pressure because I decide when something comes out, even if it's, you know, because I had a huge issue with the amount of time that, because it's based on this old-fashioned like album cycle, and you've got to tour it for 3 years, and then you've got to make people wait, and it's like, well, not in the world of TikTok, where they, you know, things change constantly. And then I met my friend Brad, who he has like a label services company, who basically do I'm going to say the boring stuff. I find it really interesting, but, you know, like figure out like distribution and manufacturing and how you know, get your stuff on Spotify and Apple Music. And he was like, well, you know, when would you like this to come out? Like maybe like in a year? And I was like, how about 3 months? And he's like, okay. And then we did it. And it was just, you know, I think that a lot of labels are missing a trick in terms of that, in terms of, you know, why not put out 2 albums and 6 EPs
which I think,
in a year?
I think again, that to me sort of speaks of kind of mindset, you know, that you got, you know, somebody like Brad and yourself sort of working together, where you've got that kind of like open or kind of growth mindset. Okay, we can do this. You know, it's not an automatic kind of shutdown, which is what you get with sort of labels and perhaps institutions. It's like, it's this way or no way.
Or no way. And also they're basing that on, because I mean, fundamentally a label is a business and a company, and they need to make money, and all of their decisions are driven by money, which in a way isn't a bad thing, because like that's what they are. They're not pretending not to be that, but they make decisions based on, you know, will this be financially viable? But I've made more money and more immediate money doing it this way than I ever did with them. And so I think it's just kind of like a bit misguided, and there's not enough faith put into creative people in terms of like, they know their audience better than a label does. It's just like, I know that like I love making zines, and I know that people love buying them.
Totally.
Whereas a label's just like, well, you know, and like, let's check if you know, this is like, I've had to like buy my own records to sell on tour for full price from labels. I have to ask permission to use my own songs in things that I'm working on, because I don't own them anymore. So yeah, like when I first decided to self-release, I was like, I'll probably make no money, I might lose money, but at least I'll be happy. Whereas like, actually I'm happy, and I am looking at potentially being able to do just music full time. Just, I think part of the gaslighty thing, where they're like, you'll be nothing without me, and it's like, no, you'll be nothing without us.
That's right. You know, you're the kind of like the creator, the sort of the content, you know, kind of owner and kind of.
You were gonna say content creator.
Absolutely, of course I was.
Gonna put that in my bio. Content creator.
I mean, you're probably gonna laugh as well, but there's like another word which is sort of used a lot, but I do think it's kind of quite important, is relatability.
Yeah, for sure.
Used a lot, and like sometimes like words start out with like good intentions, and they become sort of used by everybody, and they sort of lose the meaning. I think relatability, getting into that sort of zone almost, but I think it's just like really important, you know, that you don't have to, you're building something for the kind of the long term, you know, and it's not like immediate kind of sales. It's like, you know, will this product line make a sale? No, maybe no, it won't, but it will help kind of build the, you know, the picture of who you are as a kind of person.
Exactly. And I think relatability is like the essence of music anyway, in that you find music that relates to you or your feeling or your soul. And I think that for me, that, you know, the people that I was interested in when I was younger was people I could relate to, in the sense of like, oh, you're a freak, so am I. And I think that, like, you know, labels can work so hard on like packaging a person in a saleable way. Saleable a word?
Yeah, it'll do. Yeah,
I'm always learning.
Yeah,
And then and they're like, how do we deliver this and convey? It's almost like they think they've got to fucking trick everyone into like being like consumer product, where it's just like, it's not a product, it's human. And all they have to do is be themselves, and then people like them will relate. And that is so much more fulfilling for both parties involved.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And and I think we're seeing like a lot more of that now in a world where people really can, like, I know there's loads of issues with social media and stuff, but it's really given people an opportunity to be themselves and find other people like them.
I think particularly kind of what you do with the kind of type of lyrics that you write, the basically kind of like the way that you kind of record your music and that you produce your music. I mean, that sort of speaks to people, because it puts it within, almost kind of like within sight.
Well, that's the thing.
I could do this. These issues relate to me as well, and
totally.
I could perhaps do that.
Yeah, because there's so many things where you could look at something and be like, I love that thing, or I could never do. Okay. Also, animation. No one told me animation was a job. I didn't even, I loved like cartoons and Disney and all of this stuff when I was a kid, and it just never crossed my mind that I could do it. And it's really easy. It's not. It's like, it's so much hard work, and you really do have to have patience.
You really do. It takes years.
Yeah, it takes a really long time, but it's just not impossible. Everything I do, and I don't mean this in like a big-headed way, I mean it as in anyone can do it. Like, I taught myself everything. Granted, I did have my mum who taught me how to use Photoshop when I was a kid, which was just the best thing ever. But like, anyone can do anything. You just, you can just learn it on fucking YouTube.
Yeah.
And there's I just don't like this, there's the people, and then there's like other, like these like unattainable people doing unattainable things because they're special. And it's just like, no, they just kind of like practiced something and like put in the work.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to be happy and do a job they love. That's my wish for the world.
That's your wish for the world.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Beth, I think that's a fantastic place to stop. Really, really kind of positive. So, listen, thanks again. Best of luck with the new records.
Thank you.
Kind of like touring when it all kind of comes back.
Yeah.
And look forward to catching up. So, best of luck with everything.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show, and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.